Hi everyone. Welcome to episode 37 of our student athlete interview. My name's Katie and I'm one of the summer interns this summer at SportsFinda. So the student athlete interview series shows the life of college athletes at all levels and all different sports. So our guest today is Grace Jackson. She's a rising sophomore middle infielder for Princeton softball. So let's add Grace. Hi Grace, how are
Hi,
you?
Katie. I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So let's go ahead and get started. So when did you start playing softball and what made you start playing softball?
Yeah, so I started playing softball at a really young age. I started playing t-ball when I was 3. And then I guess I started playing competitive softball probably middle school is when I joined club. Um, and so it was kind of just expected in my family to play. Both my parents played sports in college. My mom actually played softball in college. Um, so yeah, softball was kind of just a sport I was expected to play. I played a lot of sports growing up, but softball is definitely the one that just kind of stuck with me.
Yeah, for sure. So did you have any role models or favorite players growing up, especially since you started from such a young age?
Yeah, I guess Jenny Finch was probably my biggest softball role model, especially I was a pitcher when I was younger. So she was the ultimate competitor. I loved like watching her YouTube videos and learning from her. And then I would also say Kobe Bryant was a huge role model for me. Um, I always loved watching him play. He was another like ultimate competitor who just within my family, we always like loved watching him too. So probably those two.
Yeah, awesome. So you played for a while, but when did you know that playing in college was an option for you?
Um, I would say probably from a young age as well. My father works in college athletics, so I've always been surrounded, like in the collegiate community, and I've always looked up to those athletes as well. So I knew from a young age that that's what I wanted to do. Um, and then when I started being recruited in middle school, I guess that's when I knew like, oh, I can actually do this. Um, and I mean, obviously, with the softball rule change, it cut off all communications until September 1st year, junior year, which kind of changed things. But yeah, middle school is when I found out, like, oh, I could do this.
Yeah, so you started talking about it a little bit, but what was your recruiting process like specifically at Princeton? When did they start recruiting you? Did you go to camps, that whole thing?
Yeah. So Princeton, I got in contact with them my freshman year. I randomly just went to one of their camps just because I only live an hour away from campus. Um, and I ended up having a really great relationship with Coach Van Akron from the start. And I've just always been in contact with her ever since I went to that camp freshman year. And I continued to go to camps sophomore year, junior year, continue talking with them. I'd invite them to my games in the summer. And then everything had to stop that my sophomore year, I guess, because of that rule change, which kind of screwed everything up a little bit. But it ended up working out, ended up being fine. And then the other thing is with Princeton, obviously academics are really important. So that was another huge aspect of my recruiting process. Like, even though I was talking to Princeton my freshman, sophomore year, like, nothing could be offered to me until they knew like my grades were at a certain standard, my SAT was at a certain standard.
Yeah, for sure. So what made you choose Princeton as opposed to like the other schools that you were talking to?
Um, Honestly, it was the feeling that I had when I was on campus. It's just a certain gut feeling, like this is the place that you're supposed to be. Um, I loved the team culture. I loved the coaches. I loved just the sense of community that you had at Princeton. And then I also knew that I wanted a academically challenging school. I wanted a school with a great networking opportunity. And I also wanted to play competitive softball, and I knew I would get all three of those things at Princeton.
Yeah, awesome. So after having your first year of Princeton, what do you think the biggest change was from high school to college, both like academically and athletically? I know you didn't have a season, but like you still had practices and stuff. So what do you think the biggest change was in both of those areas?
I would say definitely the caliber of both the education and just athletics. It's just a whole nother world from high school. Um, and it's also just the people you're surrounded with. Like, yes, maybe you were the best student at your high school, you're the best athlete, but now you're surrounded by the world's best students and the world's best athletes. And I think that can just be an adjustment in of itself. Um, so yeah, I think it's just a whole different caliber, and it's adjusting to that.
For sure. So with this like adjustment, what was your biggest like struggle, or what helped you with the balance between having softball every day and having schoolwork? So what did you do to kind of balance those?
I definitely leaned on my teammates a lot and just the friends that I made at school. Because we were all kind of going through the same things together and just using like each other, like the community we created, we were able to kind of figure it out. So that was a huge thing for me. And we just all talked like, okay, how are we going to manage like our social lives, our athletic life, and our schoolwork? And we just all helped each other and used each other throughout this past semester, I guess, or year.
So during the pandemic, what was it like practicing and then having a few games? What was that whole thing like?
It was definitely tough. I mean, obviously, in the Ivy League, it was a little bit frustrating this past semester watching everyone else play and us not being able to have a season. But I mean, just from this past year, you learned like you just take what you can get, I guess. So it's just nice being around my teammates for the first time, like practicing, learning plays, like learning kind of how the team works.
Yeah.
Which I mean is very important. And I mean, now we're just looking forward to playing in the fall and the spring. So I mean,
Yeah,
now we're just excited.
for sure. So what would you say is your greatest accomplishment as an athlete?
Um, I don't know. I guess just kind of finding myself, like knowing who I am as an athlete, which I think took a lot. Moving my freshman year in high school from Southern California to Philadelphia was a huge change, and softball is huge in Southern California, and it's not as big in Philadelphia, but I still worked through all of that. I made the best of the situation, I think, and ended up ultimately like where it was like I ended up at my dream school. So yeah, I guess happy with that.
Where you are now, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and lastly, do you have any advice for student athletes to play at the collegiate level, for them going through the recruiting process? Like, what's your biggest tip you would give those kids?
I guess it's just control what you can control. And I mean, this year taught us that more than anything.
For sure, yeah.
Don't worry about what your teammates are doing, what other schools are doing. Just worry about yourself, and do what's best for you. Like, don't think like, oh, I'm not being recruited by a Power 5 school, like I'm not as good. Like, it's just find like your niche, I guess. Just find whatever works for you.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Have a good rest of your day. Thanks everyone for watching.
You too. Bye.